My son gave my house to his wife's parents. He forgot who actually owned it until I changed the locks. The afternoon light fell through the shutters like ribbons of gold across my old piano. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but memory. I had just finished polishing the last key when I heard her voice drift from the living room, sharp and sugar-sweet, the kind of tone that sounds polite if you don't listen too closely. "Do not sit on that chair, Mama. My parents will not want that smelly antique thing in their new home." Her heels clicked like insults across the wood floor. Brianna always walked as if she owned the ground she stood on. My son followed, as he always did, a step behind her and half a step above decency. "You should thank my wife, Mama," Evan said with that smirk he practiced in mirrors. "She is helping this house look like someone actually lives here, not like a museum for dead people." I kept my back straight, my cloth still moving across the keys. "Whose new home are you talking about, son?" He grinned like a child who enjoys breaking something fragile. "Ours, of course. We signed the papers yesterday. Brianna's parents are moving in next week. You can stay, of course. We will set you up nicely in the attic. You always said you like quiet places." For a second, the sound of his words didn't reach my heart. It hovered somewhere above my ribs, waiting for permission to wound. The attic. The same one where I used to hang Christmas ornaments for him when he was 6, when he believed the world was good. Brianna leaned against the doorway, her nails painted the color of blood, disguised as wine. "If you had sold the house when we told you to, we could have bought something elegant, maybe in the Garden District. But you cling to the past, Mama, and the past is heavy. It is going to crush you someday." I turned to face her, still holding the cleaning cloth, my reflection small in the piano's black polish. "The past built these walls," I said. "All you are doing is hanging curtains over it." She laughed, a short metallic sound. "Oh, please, this place smells like mothballs and grief. It is time someone with taste took over." Evan chuckled beside her, proud of his cruelty, proud of her. Together they looked like an advertisement for success, built on someone else's spine. He picked up the framed wedding photo of me and James from the mantel, turned it over in his hand as if reading a story he no longer believed, and then dropped it. The glass cracked across our smiles. "I'm tired of you living in a museum for dead people," he said. For a long moment, there was only the sound of glass settling into the rug. "The only thing dying here, Evan," I said softly, "is your gratitude." He opened his mouth, maybe to shout, maybe to apologize, but Brianna caught his arm and pulled him toward the kitchen. "Come on," she said. "Let her talk to her ghosts." Their laughter faded into the hall. I knelt, gathering the shards of glass carefully. James's eyes looked up at me from beneath the broken pane. He had always known this day would come, the day our son would trade inheritance for illusion. I placed the photo face down on the table, stood, and took a deep breath that tasted of lemon oil and disappointment. Through the front window, I saw the realtor's sign gleaming in the Sunday sold. The word looked almost merciful in its finality. A little piece of me wanted to believe that maybe they were right, that maybe I was the ghost here. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The street smelled of magnolia and gasoline, the two scents of New Orleans that never agree with each other. A mailman waved from the corner. He had been delivering letters here for 40 years, long enough to remember when my husband painted the shutters sky blue. Now they were peeling, but still holding on, just like me. Behind me, Brianna was on the phone. Her voice carried through the open window. "Yes, Daddy, the house is perfect. We will redo everything. Oh, and Mama wants the downstairs bedroom, of course, the one facing the garden." The words struck like tiny hammers. Her parents, moving into my bedroom, the one where James and I danced once when the radio played too softly to disturb the neighbors. I pressed a hand to my chest. For a moment, the pain felt old, but it wasn't. It was brand new, sharp and glittering. Evan came outside a few minutes later, phone in hand. "You should start packing your old things," he said. "Brianna wants to surprise her parents with the redesign before they move in, and don't worry, we'll keep your piano if it fits the theme." I wanted to ask him what theme required erasing one's mother, but I did not. I simply looked at him the way I used to when he was 5, and lying about stealing cookies, quiet, knowing, unwilling to argue with smallness. "Thank you for letting me know," I said. He hesitated, sensing something in my tone that he didn't understand. "You will like it up there," he said, nodding toward the attic window. "It is peaceful." "Peace," I murmured, "isn't something you move me to, Evan. It is something I choose." He blinked, confused, then shrugged and went back inside. When the door closed, I sat down on the porch step and watched the late-day sun crawl across the cracked bricks. The heat lifted the faint scent of jasmine from the vines. Somewhere down the street, a saxophone was playing, slow and mournful. It reminded me of James. He always said the house listened to music better than people did. Now the house listened again, silent witness to betrayal. I brushed a bit of dust from my skirt, looked once more at the gleaming word on the sign SOLAD, and whispered to it, calm and clear, "Maybe on paper, darling, but this is still my home." When I was young, the world moved to rhythm and applause. The sound of my piano filled concert halls across the South, from Baton Rouge to Mobile, and back then people used to tell me I made the air shimmer. I believed them. I was Opal Jean Carter, the woman who made even grief sound like art. Then, one winter evening, the phone rang, and every note I had ever played fell silent. The ferry James worked on had capsized in a storm crossing the Mississippi. They said the current took him fast. They said he didn't suffer. People always say that, as if it is a comfort. I stopped performing after that night. I tried to go back once, but the stage lights were too bright, and I could not hear myself over the sound of water in my head. I began teaching children in the neighborhood lessons for free, mostly to the ones whose families could not afford instruments. Their small fingers stumbled across the keys, and each mistake felt like a heartbeat coming back to life. The parents would thank me with casseroles, sometimes with flowers, and I thought perhaps kindness could replace applause. Evan was studying law then, tall and handsome, and ashamed of me in a way he could not name. One afternoon he came home earlier than expected and found me sitting with one of my students, a little boy who had lost his mother. We were playing a hymn for her funeral the next day. The boy was crying, so I hummed along softly, trying to steady him. Later, as we ate supper, Evan dropped his fork and said, "Do you know what people at school said today? They said my mother plays at funerals for pocket change." I looked at him, confused. "I play to help them grieve," I said. He laughed once, bitterly. "I told them you were dead. It was easier." The words struck me harder than any storm ever could, but I told myself he was just young, angry, trying to survive the cruelty of other people's sons. I thought time would make him kind again. Time, as it turns out, teaches some hearts only how to calcify. Years passed, and I watched Evan build a career on ambition and presentation. He married Brianna, a woman with diamond nails and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She called me Mama when people were around, but that relic when they weren't. "Mama doesn't understand how the world works now," she told Evan once, thinking I couldn't hear. "She keeps that dusty house like a shrine. You could have been so much more if you'd just let go of her and her ghosts." And Evan, instead of defending me, said quietly, "She's just stuck in the past. Everything she touches turns into memory." They both wanted the house. Not for sentiment, not for history, but for what it was worth on paper. They hated that it stood as proof I had lived without them, that it was something they could not control. When Evan started his first firm, he borrowed money he didn't have and lost it in one bad investment. I remember the night he came to me, face pale, voice trembling. "If I do not pay this debt, they will take everything, Mama, please." Without hesitation, I sold my piano. The Steinway I had played my debut on, the one James had saved for years to buy. I told myself love was heavier than wood, and so I let it go. He took the check from my hand, hugged me once, and whispered, "You will not regret this, Mama." He was right, in a way. I did not regret helping him. I regretted watching who he became afterward. He came back years later with that same careless tone. "That old piano was a relic anyway. You did the right thing." I asked him softly, "Do you remember what that piano bought you, Evan?" He smiled. Freedom. No, I said. It bought you a second chance. He didn't understand the difference, and I realized then he never would. When Brianna moved in, she filled the walls with mirrors and glass sculptures, as if trying to erase every trace of music. Minimalism is elegance, she said. No one wants to live inside nostalgia. I told her the house already had a soul. It did not need a makeover. She laughed. A soul does not pay property taxes. Every time she spoke, she chipped another piece from the quiet I had built. And Evan, who once wept when I played lullabies, now looked at me as if I were a weight around his neck. He said it one night over dinner, after too much wine. You wasted your life looking backward. You could have remarried, toured again, been someone. But you chose to rot in this house, clinging to ghosts. I put down my fork and answered, if remembering love is rot, then let me decay beautifully. He rolled his eyes. Brianna smirked. They did not see that the woman they dismissed still owned the floor under their polished shoes. Later that night, I sat alone in the parlor. The house creaked around me, its bones familiar. I opened the record player, placed the old vinyl on the turntable, and let Debussy's Clair de Lune fill the room. The notes wove through the air like a prayer to something beyond forgiveness. The moonlight slipped through the lace curtains, silvering the dust on the piano where the Steinway used to stand. My fingers moved on the ghost of those keys, tracing invisible chords, remembering where every sound once lived. The music made me cry, but not the way grief does. These tears were colder, quieter, like water finding its path through stone. Somewhere, deep inside, the part of me that used to wait for applause began to stir again, not to perform, but to plan. Because beneath the sadness was something new, something sharp. I was beginning to understand that survival is just another kind of performance, and I was ready for an encore. It was the kind of morning that made the air feel thick with ghosts. The house was too quiet, too polite in its silence, as if it knew something I didn't. I had decided to clean the attic, a space I had avoided since James died, because Evan had said that was my new room. I wanted to see what sort of prison they had chosen for me. The stairs creaked beneath my weight, groaning in protest, like old bones remembering a fall. Dust floated in slanted light from the single window, where the lace curtain was stiff with age. Boxes stacked high along the walls leaned into each other, their labels faded to whispers. Christmas, 1979. Recitals, Carter family. I sat down on a wooden trunk and began to open them one by one. Yellowed programs from performances long gone, photos of me and James, letters from friends now buried somewhere the river runs. And beneath it all, an envelope, brittle and brown, sealed with a faint wax stamp that read, Carter, 1987 Preservation Authority. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were two documents. The first was a copy of the old home insurance policy, issued the year after James and I restored the house. The second, tucked neatly behind it, stopped my breath. It was a notarized certification from the New Orleans Preservation and Historical Architecture Board. It stated, in ornate script, that the house on Augustine Street, had been designated a protected heritage property. Any future sale or transfer required the signature of the original registered owner, me. Without it, no transaction could be considered legally binding. I stared at the page until the words blurred. My name, Opal Jean Carter, was written there in ink that had outlived love, trust, and maybe even common decency. They did not know. Evan and Brianna had no idea. I could almost hear Brianna's voice echoing from last week, that careless laugh of hers. It's not like the old bat can even read the fine print. And then, as if the devil wanted to confirm her words, I found another kind of proof. The attic had a small table where James once kept his radio. On it sat an ancient answering machine, the kind with cassette tapes inside. I pressed the play button, not expecting it to work, but it did. The machine crackled, sputtered, then hummed to life with a click that sounded like fate turning over in its sleep. Evan's voice came through first, younger, but unmistakably his. She won't read it, trust me. Her eyesight's shot. Just tell her it's a form for tax reduction. She'll sign anything if you say it's for her benefit. Then Brianna's laugh, a sound too sharp to belong in a house built by love. "You're sure she won't ask questions?" "Even if she does," Evan replied, "just tell her it's standard procedure. The old woman doesn't know the law anymore. She's lucky we're taking care of it before she forgets everything." The recording clicked off, leaving only the hum of the tape. For a long time I sat there, my hands folded in my lap. My heart didn't race, my eyes didn't sting. What came over me wasn't sadness, it was stillness, cold and deliberate. They had forged my trust. My son had made me sign away my own home under the pretense of paperwork, and they thought I was too blind to notice. I picked up my old notebook from the trunk, its cover cracked, pages yellowed at the edges. I had once used it to write music. Now, it would hold something far quieter but just as powerful. I turned to a blank page and wrote in small, steady cursive, "Not everyone who forgets remembers nothing. Some just wait until it's time to teach again." The act of writing steadied my breath. I closed the notebook, slipped it into my pocket, and stood. The attic window overlooked the street. From there, I could see Jake Peterson across the road, kneeling by his pickup truck, oil-stained hands working at some repair. Jake had lived next door for 30 years, a widower, quiet, kind, always ready with a tool or a story. He was the kind of man who remembered things, too. I watched him for a moment before calling through the open window. "Jake." He looked up, squinting through the sunlight. "Well, morning, Miss Opal. You finally cleaning that old attic of yours?" I smiled faintly. "Something like that. You still know how to change locks?" He chuckled. "Been doing it longer than I've been shaving. Why, you thinking of keeping someone out?" I met his gaze across the street and said, "Calm as scripture, maybe, or letting someone in, someone honest." He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "When you need me?" "Weekend," I said. "Saturday. I'll have the keys ready." Jake nodded slowly, sensing something in my tone that told him not to ask questions. "Saturday it is, Miss Opal. I'll bring the good set." When he turned back to his work, I closed the window and leaned against the frame. Outside, the world carried on, cars passing, children laughing, the faint hum of life that didn't know justice was about to wake. I looked down once more at the document from 1987, the ink shimmering faintly in the light. The word "protected" seemed to glow like a blessing. I folded the papers carefully, tucked them into a folder labeled "Receipts," and placed it on the piano downstairs. Then I sat before it, pressing one soft note. The sound trembled in the air, uncertain but alive. "James," I whispered, "they think I've gone quiet, but they've mistaken silence for surrender." The note lingered in the air like a vow, fading slow and sure, as I smiled to myself. Justice, like music, waits for the right moment. The day they called the housewarming began like any other Louisiana morning: thick air, the smell of wet magnolia, thunder murmuring somewhere beyond the river. I brewed chicory coffee and watched strangers hang balloons where ivy once grew. "Welcome home," the sign said. The irony stung. Inside, Brianna ruled the room like she'd been born here. "Evan, move that vase closer to the fireplace. Daddy wants the background to look more heritage," she said, her parents sipping champagne on my couch as if inspecting their new estate. When I came down the stairs, her smile cracked. "Oh, Mama, you're awake. I was hoping you'd rest until the photographers leave. You look tired." "I'm sure you'd prefer me invisible," I said, smoothing my cardigan, "but I've had too much practice being polite to vanish." Evan appeared, straightening his tie. "Don't start, Mama. It's a big day. We're showing the press how our family's restoring history." "Our family?" I asked. "You mean your wife's?" He gave that hollow laugh, the kind that hides shame. "It's a new start for everyone." Reporters arrived, cameras flashing. Brianna twirled like an actress. "We wanted to preserve the soul of this house, but make it more livable. New money, old bones, you know." Evan grinned, arm around her waist. "We're the new generation breathing life into tradition." Tradition. I had played Chopin in that parlor when he was 6, his laughter echoing off these same walls. Now I was the ghost in his story. "Mrs. Carter," one reporter called. "Would you step in for a family photo?" Brianna's perfume stung as I stood beside her. "Closer," she whispered. "Smile." Mrs. Carter, another asked. You must be proud seeing your son continue the family legacy. I looked straight into the lens. Proud? I never knew theft could be called legacy. The silence was delicious. Brianna's mother coughed. Her husband muttered. Brianna recovered, smiling thinly. The older generation struggles to adapt, but thankfully, progress doesn't need their permission anymore. The sentence hit the air like a slap. Cameras still rolling, Evan lifted his glass. To progress and letting go of the past. Applause followed. I stepped out of frame, heels clicking like punctuation. No one noticed the cameraman's red light still blinking. From the hallway, I heard Brianna whisper, "Don't mind her. She thinks the house belongs to her because she's old." Old. The word sliced clean through the laughter. In the music room, the piano waited faithful, silent. I touched its lid, feeling the vibrations of false joy in the floorboards. Through its reflection, I saw Brianna boast to her friends, "Soon this will be our home, completely." The camera caught that too. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. I slipped out to the garden. The magnolia tree James planted bloomed above me, white petals trembling like applause from the dead. Inside, they toasted their theft. But I was already writing the ending. It happened on a Friday, the kind of hot Louisiana afternoon when even the air felt tired. Brianna had posted a video that morning, flaunting my porch to her followers. "When you work hard, life rewards you," she said sweetly, standing under the welcome home sign. Behind her, the house looked like a hostage. By noon, their SUV disappeared down the road. I finished my tea, put on my hat, and went to the Preservation Authority on Royal Street. The building smelled of paper and justice. I handed the clerk my envelope. "There's been an illegal transfer of property," I said. Two officials examined the documents, my deed, the 1,987 preservation certificate, and the flash drive I'd brought. They played the video. Evan's voice, cold and clear. "She won't read it. Just tell her it's a tax form." Then Brianna's laughter. "Progress doesn't need their permission anymore." When it ended, one official looked over his glasses. "Mrs. Carter, this is enough to void every transaction under your son's name. Forgery of a preservation deed is a felony." The woman beside him asked gently, "Would you like to press charges?" I thought of Evan as a boy, asleep after piano lessons. Then I remembered Brianna's words, "She thinks the house is hers because she's old." "Not yet," I said. "Sometimes lessons last longer than punishment." They gave me a stamped letter affirming my ownership. "Keep it visible," she said. Outside, thunder growled in the distance. I called Jake. "You still fix locks?" He chuckled. "Locks or trouble?" "A little of both." Jake arrived by dusk, his truck rumbling up the drive. By the time the sun dipped below the oaks, every door had a new lock. The house finally exhaled. By the time the sun dipped below the oaks, every door had a new lock. Every window latch gleamed. I taped the sign I'd printed the night before across the gate. "Property of Opal Jean Carter under preservation law." The house seemed to exhale. 2 days later, they came back early. Tires screeched, doors slammed. "What the hell is this?" Evan shouted, rattling the doorknob. Jake stood calmly beside his truck, filming. "Evening. You might want to check the city registry. This place isn't yours anymore." "That's impossible," Brianna screamed. "You're trespassing." I opened the door slowly, letter in hand. "Evening, Evan. Brianna. I've lived here since 1962, and I never gave a thief my house keys." "You'll die here alone," Evan yelled. I looked at him, the boy I'd once carried through storms. "Better alone," I said softly, than buried beside someone who lost his shame. The police arrived minutes later. After reading the documents, one officer tipped his hat. "Ma'am, everything's in your favor. This house is yours." As their car disappeared into the night, I touched the cool brass of the new lock. The house hummed quietly alive again, unafraid. For the first time in decades, I wasn't guarding the past. I was protecting proof that it had never left me. It started with a phone call from Jake early Monday morning. Miss Opal, he said, his voice somewhere between amusement and awe, you might want to turn on Channel 4. I did. There I was on television, not in person, but in the reflection of the parlor mirror, standing just beyond the camera's reach while Brianna beamed for the reporters. The segment replayed the housewarming interview in slow motion, Evan raising his glass, Brianna's parents applauding, and then that one sentence, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Progress doesn't need their permission anymore. The camera zoomed in on her face, freezing that moment. The anchor's voice came next, cool and steady. Viewers online are calling it the quote of the week, though not for the reasons the family intended. What began as a celebration of legacy has become a public scandal of entitlement. By noon, the clip had been shared over 5 million times. Twitter renamed it the Permission House. Comment sections boiled over with fury, some furious for me, others furious at the privilege that dripped from every frame. Someone uploaded a side-by-side comparison. On the left, Brianna's smug smile. On the right, the preservation record bearing my name. The caption read, "You don't get to erase the people who built the walls you brag about." The local paper printed it in black and white. Son steals heritage home from mother fake transfer, under investigation. My phone began ringing nonstop. Reporters, old neighbors, even former students from the conservatory. One message came from a woman I'd taught decades ago. "You always said truth has its own rhythm. Guess the world finally learned to dance to it." By the end of the day, the city's Preservation Authority issued a public statement confirming the fraud. The police followed soon after. They came to collect copies of the forged deed, and the recording from the answering machine, the one where Evan had mocked my blindness. I handed everything over without a tremor. The younger officer, polite and embarrassed, said, "We'll need to suspend access to all secondary accounts tied to the property until the investigation is complete." I smiled. "You'll find those accounts already closed. I prefer a clean ending." That week was chaos for them. Evan's firm, one of those sleek downtown law offices that boasted about integrity, placed him on immediate leave. The statement was merciless. Pending review for ethical misconduct and document falsification. Brianna lost her job the same day. The PR agency she worked for released a memo calling her actions reputationally inconsistent with brand values. Translation: she'd become poison overnight. Their shiny online profiles, once full of brunches and brand sponsorships, turned silent. And as if karma wanted to make its point perfectly symmetrical, the Langfords, the proud parents who'd boasted about their new home, received an eviction notice from the Preservation Office. Unauthorized occupancy of a protected historical property. By Friday, the house that had once echoed with their laughter stood still again. The banners were gone, the champagne bottles emptied, and all that remained was the sign Jake had helped me hang. Property of Opal Jean Carter, protected by law. Still, I knew Evan would come, and he did. He arrived late in the afternoon, just as the cicadas began their slow hymn. His car door slammed hard enough to startle the birds off the magnolia tree. I watched from the window as he paced the porch before knocking. When I opened the door, his face was drawn and gray. The arrogance that had once animated him had turned to desperation. He held a manila folder under his arm like it might keep him from drowning. "Mama," he said, his voice cracking on the second syllable, "I need to talk to you." "I imagine you do," I said. "Come in." He stepped inside hesitantly, glancing around like a man visiting his own ghost. They said I can't work until this is resolved, that it's fraud, or whatever. Brianna's gone back to her parents' place. I just need your help to make it right. I motioned toward the piano bench. He didn't sit. He opened the folder, slid a new document across the table. "This one's real, Mama. I had it drawn up legally this time. No tricks. If you just sign it, we can transfer ownership properly. Then, I'll get back on my feet, and I'll take care of you. I'll even get you into a good home, one with nurses, gardens, people your age." I looked at him for a long moment. "A good home?" "Yes," he said quickly. "You won't have to worry about anything. Meals, doctors, everything. You've done enough. Let me handle things now." "Handle things," I repeated softly, tasting the phrase. Like you handled the truth? Like you handled your wife's cruelty? Like you handled my name? He swallowed hard. I made mistakes, Mama, but I'm trying to fix them. I stood and walked to the window, watching the wind stir the curtains. Do you know what this house was built on, Evan? Not wood, not nails. Love. Your father laid every floorboard with his hands. He used to say a house is a promise. You broke that promise. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. Please, Mama, I just need your signature. I turned and looked him in the eye, steady and unblinking. No, son, you need forgiveness, and that's not written in ink. His face twisted, grief, anger, something in between. You can't do this, they'll ruin me. Maybe, I said, but I gave you every tool to build a life worth keeping. What you built instead, that's not mine to save. He took a step back, shaking his head. You'll die alone in this place. I smiled sadly. Better alone in a house built on honesty than surrounded by people who think kindness is a transaction. He left without another word. The screen door banged behind him, the sound of defeat echoing through the hall. That night, as I sat by the piano, I played Clair de Lune again, soft, deliberate. Outside a storm gathered, lightning flickering through the magnolia leaves. I let the thunder roll, each note threading through the rain like memory. In between chords, my phone buzzed a notification. Someone had uploaded the full video of the Preservation Authority's statement. The caption read, "Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it changes the locks." The clip showed my sign, my face, the quiet steadiness that the world had mistaken for fragility. Comments poured in, thousands of strangers saying words I hadn't heard in years. Thank you. You remind me of my grandmother. You remind me to stand up. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I closed the phone and looked at the piano keys, glistening in the lamplight. For the first time since James died, the house didn't feel like a grave. It felt like a guardian. And somewhere deep in the bones of these old walls, I could almost hear his voice, steady, proud, unyielding. You did good, Opal. I smiled through the tears that came then, soft and unashamed, because maybe justice wasn't about punishment after all. Maybe it was about reminding the world that even the quietest women could still make the loudest echoes. They called it the Locked Room Gallery. Jake came up with the name one warm Sunday morning while sanding the porch railings. It fits, he said, brushing sawdust from his hands. You locked the door on the people who took from you, and now you're unlocking it for the ones who've been forgotten. I smiled at that. He always had a knack for saying simple things that sounded like scripture. The idea had started quietly, just a seed of thought, planted the night the headlines faded and the world moved on. Justice, I realized, wasn't enough. You could win the war, but what then? What would you do with the silence after victory? For years, this house had been a mausoleum of memory. Now, I wanted it to breathe again. So I opened my doors to those who had been dismissed, like me. The first to arrive was Mrs. LeBlanc, 86, once a painter who sold portraits in Jackson Square before her hands began to tremble. She came carrying 3 canvases, wrapped in an old quilt, and said, "They told me nobody buys art from the elderly. Maybe nobody should have told me." Then came Mr. Alvarez, a jazz trumpeter who hadn't played in public since Katrina took his home. He sat in the parlor, polishing his dented horn, and whispered, "It still plays, just needed air." I gave them both space. The parlor became a studio, the dining room a gallery, the music room, oh, that sweet room with its ghosts and echoes, became a stage again. Jake helped with everything. He fixed the plumbing, repainted the shutters, rewired the old chandelier so it glittered instead of flickered. He never asked for payment. When I insisted, he just said, "Seeing you alive again is payment enough." Sometimes, in the evenings, we'd sit on the porch with 2 glasses of sweet tea and listen to the city hum. "You ever think we're too old for new beginnings?" I asked him once. He chuckled. "Nah, we're just finally old enough to start 'em right." Inside, the house began to fill with sound again, Brush strokes, laughter, music. It no longer felt haunted, it felt inhabited. And then one afternoon, as the sun stretched across the worn floorboards, there was a soft knock on the front door. I opened it to find a small boy standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder, curls messy, shoes untied. My heart recognized him before my mind did. "Aiden," I whispered. He looked up at me with those same wide, searching eyes he'd had the day he defended me in that kitchen. Only now they held a quiet strength. "Hi, Grandma." I knelt, my knees aching but my arms ready. "Does your father know you're here?" He hesitated. "No," he said, "I shouldn't. But I wanted to show you something." From his backpack, he pulled out a folded piece of thick paper, edges smudged with color. When he opened it, I gasped. It was a painting, rough, childlike, but full of heart. Me and James, sitting on the porch, the magnolia blooming behind us. He'd even painted the piano visible through the window. Above it, in crooked blue letters, he had written, "You taught me what staying looks like." Something in me cracked wide open. I hadn't cried since the night the house was reclaimed, but the tears came then, freely, grateful. I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of grass and crayons and everything pure left in the world. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, "you don't know how much that means." He hugged me tight. "Dad's mad all the time," he said softly. "He says everyone turned against him. But I just wanted you to know, I didn't." I brushed the hair from his eyes. "Then maybe there's hope for him after all, because he raised you." Jake stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well now," he said, smiling, "if it isn't the artist himself. You hungry, kiddo?" Aiden nodded shyly. Within minutes, Jake was frying eggs while I made lemonade. And for that hour, we were a family. Not perfect, not blood bound by choice, but chosen by kindness. A week later, we held the gallery's grand opening. Reporters came again, though this time they weren't chasing scandal, they were chasing light. The living room was filled with paintings by forgotten artists, sculptures from retired craftsmen, photographs taken by women who had once been told their time had passed. The city buzzed about it. Opal Carter turned scandal into sanctuary. As guests moved from room to room, admiring the art, I stood by the piano in my old ivory dress, the same one from that cruel night at the Skyview. It no longer felt like a relic, it felt like armor polished by memory. A reporter approached me, microphone in hand. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "everyone's talking about your project. The locked room gallery has become a symbol of resilience. May I ask why that name?" I smiled, glancing around the room where laughter now echoed off walls once filled with accusation. "Because sometimes," I said, "you have to change the lock to find the key to yourself." The crowd went quiet for a beat, then applauded not politely, but warmly, the way people clap when they understand something deeper than words. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stood at the doorway looking in. The lights were low, the air thick with the scent of paint and magnolia. On the piano sat Aiden's painting, framed by Jake himself. He came up behind me, slipped his hand into mine. "You did it, Opal," he said softly. "No," I whispered, "we did." Outside, the moon hung low over Street Augustine Street, heavy and golden, like a blessing that had finally remembered my name. Inside, the piano gleamed under the lamplight, waiting. I sat down and played the opening notes of Clair de Lune. My fingers trembled, but the melody didn't. Jake listened, eyes closed. "Still sounds like the sea," he murmured. "That's because it never really left," I said. "It just learned to stay." When the final note faded, the house didn't feel like mine alone anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told they were too old, too small, too late. The locked room wasn't about shutting people out. It was about opening doors for those who'd been locked away by time. And as the night breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of roses and river salt, I whispered into the dark, "James, the promise kept itself. We're home again." They say time humbles everyone, but I've learned it doesn't always whisper, it sometimes hollows you out so the echo can teach you. 2 years had passed since I'd changed the locks. The house on Street Augustine Street now breathed with laughter, paint fumes and the sound of piano keys instead of shouting. The locked room gallery had become a small legend. Local papers called it the soul of the quarter. I didn't argue. Souls deserve homes too. But somewhere down the Gulf Coast, not all stories aged as kindly. A TV crew filmed an episode of Roadside Lives, one of those documentaries about people living out of RVs after losing everything. The camera panned over a peeling white camper parked behind a dusty diner off I-10. And inside it, hunched over a small propane stove, was my son, Evan. He looked older than I remembered, hair grayer, eyes hollowed out by sleeplessness and regret. Beside him, Brianna sat cross-legged on the couch bed, scrolling through her phone that no longer connected to anything. The producers said they traveled from state to state, picking up seasonal work, sometimes cleaning motels, sometimes managing campgrounds. When the reporter asked how they ended up there, Brianna shifted blame like a habit she'd never unlearned. "Everything changed after that stupid internet drama," she said bitterly. "People canceled us. My PR firm blacklisted me. His law license got suspended. It's not fair." The camera moved toward Evan. He didn't look up at first. Then quietly he said, "No, it's not unfair. It's earned." Brianna stared at him, shocked, as if she didn't recognize the man beside her. "What's that supposed to mean?" He finally looked into the lens. "It means my mother warned me what greed does to people. I just never thought she meant me." He rubbed his hands together, voice lower now. "She used to tell me music isn't about owning notes, it's about understanding silence. I think I get it now." The reporter, sensing a story, leaned forward. "Have you spoken to your mother since?" Evan hesitated, eyes flicking toward the small television across the camper wall. It was playing a local New Orleans arts feature, The Locked Room Gallery, Healing Through Heritage. There I was, sitting on my porch beside Jake, a microphone clipped to my collar. The interviewer had asked me what freedom felt like. "They took my music," I said on screen, my voice slow but unwavering. "So I took back the silence." "I know." For a long moment, Evan said nothing. His reflection trembled in the flickering TV light. Then he reached forward and turned up the volume. On the screen, the camera followed Aiden, taller now, confident, guiding guests through the gallery. "My grandma says every old song is just a story that refused to die," he told the reporter, smiling shyly. When the feature ended, the room inside the RV went quiet. Evan blinked hard, his throat working against words that never came. Finally he whispered, She's happy." Brianna scoffed, tossing the remote aside. "Yeah, well, she's got her little charity house now. Good for her." He turned to her, then not angry, not cruel, just tired. "She built something out of what we tried to destroy. Can you say the same?" Brianna didn't answer. She just got up, walked to the tiny bathroom, and shut the door. The lock clicked, a sound too familiar. The camera lingered on Evan's face as he looked back at the screen one last time, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hope she knows I'm sorry." The clip went viral within hours. People called it redemption, others called it too late. For me, when I saw it days later, it didn't feel like revenge or triumph. It felt like peace putting on its shoes and walking home. That evening, the light outside was soft and honey-colored, wrapping the house like forgiveness made visible. Jake sat beside me on the porch, a glass of iced tea sweating between his palms. From inside, the faint sound of piano floated through the open window, hesitant at first, then surer. Aiden was practicing Clair de Lune. He'd begged me to teach him the piece, the same one I'd once played when the world had taken everything else. His fingers sometimes stumbled over the arpeggios, but he never stopped. Jake chuckled. "He's missing a few notes." I smiled, my gaze still fixed on the boy through the window. "That's all right. He's playing from the heart, something his father never learned." The melody drifted into the twilight, imperfect but pure, and the air smelled of magnolia and lemon oil and second chances. Jake leaned back, watching the horizon. "You ever think you'd see all this again? Music, laughter, people coming and going through this house?" I took a deep breath, the kind that fills a life instead of a moment. "No," I said softly, "but I think the house did. It waited for me to remember who I was. Inside, Aiden hit a wrong chord and groaned. I laughed quietly. "You know," I said, "the funny thing about playing piano is that you can't stay angry while you listen. Every note asks you to forgive the last one." Jake nodded. "Guess that's true about people too." We sat in silence for a while, the way people do when silence itself feels like company. The gallery lights glowed through the open windows, illuminating the sign above the door. The locked room where lost things find their sound again. The last rays of sunlight caught the new brass lock on the gate, making it gleam like gold. I thought of Evan again somewhere out there, maybe watching the sunset through the cracked windshield of that RV, maybe remembering a house he once tried to claim but never truly understood. And I thought of the music still rising from these old walls, played by hands that carried both my past and my future. Jake reached for my hand. "You know, Opal," he said quietly, "you changed more than the locks." I smiled. "Maybe. But sometimes, that's all it takes to change a life." As the camera of time would have it, the scene might have ended there, an old woman, a good man, a house full of ghosts turned guardians. But the music went on. The boy inside played the final notes of Claire de Lune, softer than a prayer, and I felt the world hold its breath. Freedom, I realized, isn't a door you walk through. It's the sound that follows when you close it behind you. The screen would fade, the light dimming into gold. And across the frame, words would appear. They tried to sell her past. She changed the locks and wrote her future. And that was her story from Louisiana. A house once stolen, reclaimed with grace. A mother who proved that silence isn't weakness. It's the sound right before strength begins to sing. If you've ever been underestimated, forgotten, or silenced, remember Opal Jean Carter. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She simply changed the locks and changed her life. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where real women, real pain, and real redemption find their voice again. Hit that bell, so you never miss the next story that reminds us. Sometimes the quietest hearts tell the loudest truths. Thank you for listening. This is Grandma True Stories, where every ending finally gets the justice it deserves.